Thank you. This webinar series, PROs Around the Globe, is organized by the Export Initiative for Environmental Protection, a GSZ project funded by the German Ministry for Environment and by the Global Action Partnership for EPR. In short, the GAP for EPR, it is an international partnership established between GSZ, OECD, UNEP, and WWF. And it also receives circular economy support from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and is hosted by the Prevent Waste Alliance. And now there's an important disclaimer. The views and options expressed in these webinars do not necessarily reflect the positions of the core partners of the GAP for EPR, nor of the Prevent Waste Alliance members, or the official policy positions of the international organizations and governments involved. And for more information, please visit our GAP for EPR website or join the Prevent Waste Alliance LinkedIn channel. And you also can register for the last upcoming event of the series, as usual, on the GreenTechKnowledgeHub, where you can also register and become a member, get further invitations to webinars in the future, and, for example, join the EPR community of practice there. And you find all the links in the chat afterwards. So finally, let's get to the topic of today, PROs around the globe. The idea of this series is to bring together PROs from all around the world. We think there is a lot to be learned from each other and to meet the challenges of producer responsibility organizations in an EPR system, how to steer, rule, organize an EPR system. This is already the 6th webinar of our series. We have already had presentations from Kenya, India, Germany, and Chile. And today, in our 6 sessions, we jump to the Philippines, from where Athelie Reyes from PCX Solutions is our speaker today. And she will introduce a PRO example from a small island country, which is a most appreciated contribution to our webinar series. Athelie is an EPR manager at PCX Solutions and holds a chemical engineering degree from the University of the Philippines. She has over 10 years of experience in holistic environmental and social management and considers herself as an impact-driven sustainability professional. Athelie, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dorothy. Just give me a minute to share my screen and hopefully this works. You should be able to see my screen now. Is it working? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I'll start, and thank you again, Dorothy, and to, of course, the Prevent Waste Alliance team, and for organizing this very informative series thus far. I did watch some of the earlier sessions, and it was also like a lot of learnings for us, for our organization. It's also my pleasure to share with our network today some of the learnings that we have from the implementation of EPR in, as you mentioned, a developing country, the Philippines, and from the perspective of a PRO in the country. So I'm Athelie Reyes from PCX Solutions, and I lead our EPR and consulting efforts in the organization. So it's a very simple agenda for us today. I'll share a bit about our organization, then give a brief of the EPR law in the Philippines, as well as some initial results, because we just finished our first compliance year in 2023. Then using our work as a PRO to also show how the EPR ecosystem is currently working. So just a bit about PCX Solutions. We are on a mission to accelerate the transition to a circular economy and build a future where no plastic ends up in nature. We are a nonprofit organization. We work with governments around the world on EPR, especially in relation to plastic. We help companies understand their plastic footprint, implement some reduction strategies, and comply with legislation, of course, where it is relevant. And we also manage a fully transparent voluntary standard called the Plastic Pollution Reduction Standard to ensure the impact and responsibility of plastic waste projects. So we focus on three main areas: the continuous development of our plastic pollution reduction standard. This year, we published version 8 of the standard already after some expert reviews and public consultation. Second, we do a lot of work around policies that can address the plastic pollution problem. And in parallel, we also work as a producer responsibility organization right now in the Philippines, but we are looking towards other prospects in Southeast Asia and nearby countries. Lastly, we also execute, implement, and manage grants and collaborate with development groups, government, and all stakeholders to further knowledge and understanding of the crisis, as well as see what promising solutions to the crisis there are. And so we are also expanding our corporate consulting services to help strategies form their plastic responsibility goals, targets, and commitments, of course. This is a bit of a timeline. So we are fairly still a young organization. We started as a nonprofit in 2019. We developed the first version of PPRS at the time in 2020. It was known by a different name. We developed a minimum viable product platform in the Philippines together with a grant from Microsoft to establish a plastic credit in the Philippines. We also developed a pilot project called the Allington Dera project, which is a community waste to cash program that empowers women micro entrepreneurs. So Allington Dera means women micro entrepreneur, basically, and we develop them as leaders in the community to allow them to generate income for themselves and their community. In 2020, however, there was a focus on showing proof of concept, like how the whole ecosystem can work. So balancing basically supply, like the projects, and demand, like those that the companies that can fund the projects through plastic credits. Um, so we did get a lot of voluntary interest for the projects under our standard, both domestic and international. So in the Philippines in 2021, there was a conversation on EPR, having an EPR law. So we also took this chance to share with legislators our work in a voluntary EPR space with plastic credits. And I think this was also important for them to understand the realities on the ground and consider these in the laws that they were making. So we also served in technical working committees in Congress and in Senate as the EPR law was being crafted. In 2021 to 2022, we sort of scaled. We wanted to scale. So one major decision there was to incorporate a for-profit entity now known as PCX Markets, so that they can take care of all the commercial, and then PCX Solutions, still the nonprofit, can focus on policy work and also on the standards work. So we also separated ourselves from project development. Like the Allington Dera was turned over to another nonprofit organization. And then we, of course, increased the projects registered under our standard, and we created the second version, or version one, officially, of the platform that we have now. In 2023, when EPR was enacted in the Philippines, we became a producer responsibility organization, and later on, you'll see that it's also a multi PRO system that we have in the Philippines. And then we also started to participate in more international and regional activities, like the Global Plastic Treaty, and yeah, and also like the national partnership, plastic action partnership in Indonesia. So we also do a lot of work with Prevent, mainly last year, I think, and this year with the Plastic Credit Core Group. But we also try to be involved in this GAP group as well. Yeah. So just to give you also like the progress of PPRS, the standard that we have, already have 35 registered PPRS projects across 7 countries, collaborating with 20 project partners. So mostly we started in Southeast Asia with Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, and then we expanded to India, a few projects there, and then most recently to South America in Argentina and in Africa in Nigeria. And we have a lot of pipeline projects also coming in with new countries and existing countries as well. Our impact to date, since we started, is we've already enabled the cleanup and diversion of over 100 million kilograms of post-consumer plastic waste around the world through the 35 registered projects under the PPRS. And then in terms of EPR, we are currently supporting over 100 companies in their journey towards EPR compliance. And this is just for the Philippines for now. So now to the specifics of the EPR in the Philippines. So the Philippines, just for context, is we've been ranked as one of the largest contributors to marine plastic litter in the world. So the Philippines really had to act decisively in terms of these laws, right? So the EPR law lapsed into, sorry, for lack of a better term, lapsed into law in 2022, and we completed the first compliance year in 2023. So the law that we have defines EPR as the environmental policy approach and practice that requires producers to be environmentally responsible throughout the life cycle of a product, especially its post-consumer end of life stage. So I think this is similar to how EPR is being defined in the global community as well. So just for additional context, so in 20, this data is from 2019. We are estimated to generate an annual plastic consumption of 2.1 million metric tons of plastic every year, only 9% of which is recycled, so very similar to the global recycling rate. And at least 750,000 metric tons of mismanaged plastics enter our oceans every year. On top of that, there's also 35%, 33% that goes into landfills and dumps that still have this huge potential to leak into waterways. So because the condition of the landfills that we have in the Philippines aren't really, I would say not a lot are of the best quality. So there was also a study by the World Bank Group that highlighted why we have this plastic pollution crisis in the Philippines. Like, what are the key structural challenges? So it has to do with us being an archipelago. We have over 7,000 islands in the Philippines. So there is high logistics cost coupled with the need to collect feedstock across the archipelago. So it's not really super accessible, and then we also have one of the highest electricity costs by developing country standards. We have heavy, low value, and hard to recycle flexible packaging that represents 61% of the plastic packaging units in the Philippines. We're also known as a sachet economy. It's because, of course, like a lot of people are like living around the poverty line. So like this is all that they can afford. So it does create the economy that relies on single-use items. So there is also a very intense competition from informal recycling industry, because the recycling industry as well as other related waste management industries heavily dominated by small medium enterprises as well as the informal sector. So it kind of distorts also the market for formal recyclers. So there's not much incentive for them to really formalize in the Philippines right now. Tipping fees are also among the lowest in Asia. So this disincentivizes local governments from investing in higher levels of processing. There are also fluctuations in virgin resin prices and oil resin prices. So, and there's also lack of recycled content requirements. So there's not really an incentive here. Yeah, and again, there's really a very fragmented waste management system, and we really lack the infrastructure for recycling, for even for collection, for recycling, and there's really a challenging economics for collection that we are experiencing right now. So these are some of a lot of the factors that were considered when we were building our EPR law. So it was really designed to the challenges that we have in the Philippines. So for the EPR that we have, so very simply, like who is obliged? These are the currently large and micro, small, and medium enterprises with combined asset value of around 1.8 million US dollars who generate post-consumer plastic packaging. So currently, the scope of the EPR is just plastic packaging, but this is subdivided into categories such as flexibles, rigids, plastic bags, and polystyrene. Then the difference also with EPR in the Philippines is not only focusing on midstream, downstream, but it also encourages upstream, and we can actually use that to comply with the EPR law. So there's footprint reduction and there's also footprint recovery. So the obliged enterprises can use a combination of these upstream and downstream strategies um, to comply with the law. So there are three main obligations under the law. The first is to register and phase in an EPR program. So the EPR program will contain the strategies that the OEs can or obliged enterprises can use to comply with the law. They can do this on their own as individual enterprises or as a group referred to as a collective, or they can opt to form or authorize a PRO. So yeah, the second obligation is to meet the recovery and diversion targets, which increase every year. So we started with 20% in 2023, 20% of your footprint you have to recover and divert. It increases to 40% in 2024, and then increments of 10% until 2028 when it reaches and stabilizes at 80%. Then the third obligation is, of course, to report this to our regulators, DNR, every year after it has been validated and verified by a third-party auditor. So the one thing to note here also is for recovery and diversion, you have to recover. For example, if your footprint is 100 metric tons of flexible plastic, you have to recover 20% of that through recovery and diversion of flexible plastic packaging as well. So it has to be flexible to flexible or rigids to rigids. Yeah. These are the results, initial results. So out of an estimated 2,100 obliged enterprises that need to register an EPR program, around 947 businesses have registered already at the end of the first compliance year. We reported a total of 486 million kilograms of plastic packaging footprint, 44% of which were flexibles and 56% were rigids. And we reported also recovery and diversion of 163 million kilograms of post-consumer plastic waste in 2023. So this leads us to 46% diversion of flexible footprint and 24% diversion of rigid footprint. And we remember that the target is 20% for 2023. We used a very simple assumption of 100 US dollars as the cost of waste recovery and diversion of 1 metric ton. So we estimate that there's around 14.5 million income generated from EPR in the past year. So there's also a lot of solutions, and we recently published a case study on the Philippine EPR. This is available on our website. Just to summarize here, that some of the priority solutions that we are still recommending. Of course, this is not to say that there are no current efforts around these, but we see these as improvements that can still be made. So, just on standards, of course, social inclusion of informal waste worker sectors and just transition for them, a public registry, upstream and midstream measures under EPRs, of course, incentivizing that and making sure that there is a balance between recovery and also footprint reduction. And of course, we also want to be able to build more infrastructure through EPR, the infrastructure that the Philippines clearly needs. Yeah, and then this is the last point on the agenda. So our work as a PRO, and we have a very simple model that we work with our obliged enterprises. Um, And the first is that the obliged enterprises have to calculate and disclose their footprint, and this needs to be audited by their chosen third party auditors to ensure that this is accurate. Then once we understand the footprint of each member, we work with them individually to create their plastic responsibility strategy with them. And this can be a combination of upstream measures when they're ready, because some of them have to coordinate with their global team for multinationals, and some of them really have to find, the budget, the technology to implement some of these upstream reduction strategies. And for the plastic footprint that they cannot yet remove from their value chain right now, we also allow them to invest in downstream like plastic credits, and of course other programs like cleaning up, or yeah, something similar. And just because I keep mentioning plastic credits, so, and how this is used as a tool to comply with EPR, because earlier we saw in the downstream measures to comply with EPR, there is recovery, there is transport, there is diversion, and for that matter, the one plastic credit is actually 1 metric ton of plastic that has been collected, transported, and responsibly processed or diverted through either recycling, upcycling, or co-processing, which is using plastic as an alternative fuel and cement kilns. And then once that is done, the waste diverters provide their chain of custody documents, and we hire another third party to audit the traceability of that and make sure that the impact has already been done and delivered before we issue a plastic credit. So, our currently the EPR law in the Philippines, they don't require waste diverters to be registered under any standard yet, but we do see that there is demand for projects from companies that implement the principles that we state here, because it removes the fact that they have to perform their own due diligence on the waste diverters. Yeah, so just please bear with me for this slide. I know that it's a bit of a lot, but the aim here is to show that the interactions in the ecosystem of EPR. So we start with the Department of Environmental and Natural Resources, which is the regulator, and they give their policies monitoring to the PROs, to the obliged enterprises. Sorry, excuse me. The PRO then develops an EPR program and registers that with the regulator. And once that's registered, the EPR program is disseminated to the obliged enterprises under the PRO, and over the course of the year, the obliged enterprises would submit evidences of their compliance to the PRO to the EPR program. So an example of a compliance here is the footprint. So all of them have to compute their individual footprint. They have to get that audited by a third party of their choosing, and then they have to submit the audit report to the PRO at a certain deadline. Then they also have to prove that they are meeting their individual targets for recovery and diversion, or even footprint reduction. In this case, I only showed the downstream part, which is the waste diverter. So usually they can engage the PPRS registered projects, because the benefit of that is that um, these have already been vetted by, again, a third party auditor. These have passed the criteria requirements of a robust standard, and we already also take care of the verification of the chain of custody documents before we issue the credits. But they can also choose to engage their own waste diverters that aren't PPRS registered. The only catch there is that they have to, either them or the waste diverters have to make sure that the impact is also audited before it is submitted to the PRO. So also another benefit of PPRS is that most projects under the PPRS have some sort of social inclusion, because this is one of the environmental and social safeguards that each project has to have before they get registered with PPRS. So a lot of these projects work with the community or informal waste sector, with local governments, and we also ensure that the whole value chain is completed. So it's not just recovery, it's not just diversion, but it's the really making sure that it's up to end of waste processing. So once all those evidences are submitted to the PRO, we consolidate the report. We have it audited by another independent third-party auditor before we submit it to DNR EMB. Yeah. And sorry, I'm going a bit over time, but yeah, these
No
were the
problem.
results. Yeah, these were the results of just PCX Solutions PRO. So just taking that from the entire Philippine results that I presented earlier. So we have currently 104 member obliged enterprises, and these are a combination of FMCG, car, automotive, etc. So just a lot. Then the three member voluntary enterprises, because they can also participate if they want. And we reported 63 million in plastic packaging footprint and diverted 20 million in plastic packaging waste as well. So these are also the stats. And I just the last two slides just to focus on to show you examples of how it impacts both the project partner or the waste diverter and also the brand later on. So for this one, for example, to focus on Allington Dera, like since they started in 2020, even before the EPR, they've already funded 146 collection and aggregation sites across the Philippines. They've generated around I think this is 300,000 US dollars in community revenue, diverted 6,000 metric tons of plastic. Of course, this also supports women empowerment, and there's also an incremental income to the normal income of the women micro entrepreneurs by 63%. And the funds that are gotten from this project are also put back into the economy, so there is a huge cost on processing to make sure that the plastic being recovered are taken to end of waste processing. So that also includes logistics. But the 22% here makes sure that they can sustain the collection and the buying of the plastic waste from their community. Also, of course, with their profit and the community's profit as well. Then on the side of the obliged enterprise. So we highlight also like one example, which is L'Oreal, which is a global brand, and they have a global initiative of L'Oreal for the future that they want to be a leader in sustainability and they want to be a catalyst for change. So the Philippine team, they needed to localize that, and we were also able to start the discussions and the programs because of EPR, but also they were doing this, they wanted to do this voluntarily even before they knew that EPR came in. So it really works together because their voluntary actions can now be counted as compliance actions, and they do this in combination. Like they have plastic packaging footprint reduction, like they have green parcel programs, weight optimization, and they also have, well, the compliance target is 20% in 2023, 40% in 2024, but they committed that whatever the compliance target is, they will always recover and recycle, and take note that they wouldn't accept like any plastic credits that are not recycling or recycled, and they do 100% every year. So this is always above the compliance target. So this is their commitment, and it also builds to the EPR program of the PRO. So yeah, I mean, this is my last slide, and I guess the main message that you always want to say when discussing the EPR in the Philippines is that it's allowed us to see immediate results and start the discussions, and we realize also like some more gaps, and we are able to also gather support from and buy-in from the stakeholders because the government has always been very inclusive and systematic in how it deals with EPR. So it we kind of needed to act right away. So we couldn't really wait for the perfect solution. We couldn't wait for infrastructure. We couldn't wait for this and that before enacting EPR. So it was the other way around, that EPR first, then we solve like the problems as we go along. And I think it's also that kind of approach that is working for the Philippines because there is already impact that's being shown from the first year of compliance. So yeah, thank you, and happy to start the discussion.
Thank you very much, Athelie. This was very impressive, and yeah, a very broad view on what PCX is really achieving in the Philippines. We do have some questions already in the chat, but however, since Pauline raised her hand, I would like to start with her. Pauline, do you have a question?
Yes, thanks, Dorothy. Athelie, yeah, thanks for the presentation. Like to check if Philippines, the government has already, what do you call that, penalized anyone that has not, embarked on this journey. Is there any enforcement already done in the Philippines? Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. To my knowledge, like I can't speak, of course, for the Philippine government, but we are checking from time to time. They have issued some notices of violation. There aren't any, to my knowledge, imposition of the penalties and fines that are in the law. And they have been a bit lenient with the deadlines of a bit. Um, yeah, but it's also because I think right now they want to use the carrot, and soon enough they will have to use the stick. Um, so yeah, I think it's there. It's just that there are also like procedures being developed by government that they want to make sure that they follow due process. They're also able to do their part in terms of making sure that everyone is aware, they know what to do, they are empowered. So I think there's the reason for the delay of the imposition of the um, fines and penalties. But I think that it will soon come, and it has to at some point.
Thanks. What's the maximum penalty, Atali, for
Um,
not doing their responsibility for the obliged companies?
yeah, well, it's first offense is around 5 million to 10 million. I can't really convert it in my head right now, but in our currency, it's 5 million to 10 million pesos for the first
Okay.
offense. Then 10 to 15, I think, for the second, and 15 to 20 for the third, plus suspension of business license.
Ah, okay. So there is such a thing, which is good, yeah. I think
Yes.
suspension of the business license is critical, right? Yeah, yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Then let us have a look in the chat. There's one question from Heba Zaki, and she would like to know what do you mean with fragmented waste management? Maybe you have to explain the small island country here.
Yeah, because again, as I mentioned, the Philippines. Thank you for that, though. But the Philippines is around 7,107, if I remember my geography correct. Islands. And this is divided into three major political groups we call Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. So we have around. I'm really not sure of the amount, but there are around 2,000 maybe local government units that have um, influence over these different islands. And it's hard because the logistics costs are high. So it can't really be island to island transferring. So each island sort of needs to have their own waste management system. So it can't really be readily regulated by national government because it depends on the resources of that island and how accessible it is. So like for example, the major islands already have some infrastructure at the very least for recycling. They have good relatively good collection, but there are islands that can't really be gotten to by commercial what do you call this, commercial vehicles, or yeah, it's very hard to get into that. So that's what I mean by fragmented, that it really depends on where you are in the Philippines and how the level of control that national and regional governments have over that island.
And how expensive it is
Yes.
to recover. Yeah. Thank you. And then there's a question from Isabel Artadi. She would like to know whether there are projects on integrating the informal recycling sector. I know that there are, you already mentioned. However, it would be great if you could give an example how exactly you're doing this.
Yeah, I mean, for us, for example, because we have to follow a standard that we set ourselves, right? So there is a bit of difficulty in integrating the informal recycling sector because the problem there is we can't really get all the documents necessary to trace it. to make sure that it's auditable, verifiable, and we want to ensure that there is no double counting, that they sell to this company, to this PRO, to this company, etc. So it becomes hard. So usually the projects that we have are more informal collectors and aggregators that still go through to recycling, a formal recycling, because they have all the environmental compliances. So for now, I really can't give an example of some project that integrates informal recycling, that part, because that also needs a lot of documents, permits, and it's really not, I think, acceptable at this moment because it can't be audited. And these recyclers also try to avoid uh, government because they don't want to pay, taxes, permits, etc. So this is actually one of the challenges that we have. Like, how do we um, include them in the fold? Yeah, so I don't think I'm able to answer that question, but it's a challenge also.
Yeah, that's what we often have in our discussion, that this is a real challenge to integrate the informal sector. Aneta Züch would like to know, you brought some statistics on the EPR achievements of PCX Solutions. Are there already stats on the achievements in general in the Philippines?
Yes, I think I might. Let me just reshare my screen a bit, just for a quick while. Wait. Yeah. So let me go back a bit. Oh, yeah. This is for the entire Philippines. So just this is the footprint that we have, 486 million kilograms, but it's already combining flexibles and rigids. And then the diversion was 163 million kilograms, 46% flexibles and 24% rigids. We also have a case study where we contextualize these results because the logic was that even if we haven't reached the 2,130 required registration, it's most likely that the 947, we already captured the big businesses that have the big footprints and have the big investments into waste recovery and upstream as well. So this represents like a lot more than 20% of the 2,130. Yeah.
But Athelie, excuse me, but how do you know the figures? Because this would mean you know all the ECAR reports.
Sorry, this data was provided by the Department of Environmental and Natural Resources, but they're still conducting validation activities. I think they finished in November, so they will still publicize the final results. These are just unvalidated, or they need further validation from DNR, of course. So they need to do, yeah. But we will probably have the final validated results in December, hopefully.
Okay, thank you. And then there is Heba Zaki. Again, she would like to know whether you are responsible for the investment or operation of the facilities or recycling of treatment of waste.
Yeah,
Or are you building up the recycling sector basically in the Philippines?
We do encourage investment into infrastructure. So there are several programs that we are working with several development partners, like how to catalyze infrastructure investments. We call it like infrastructure credits, but we are still working with government to figure out this whole model. But there are some voluntary actions already happening there. But we do not, us as a PRO, do not operate our own uh, facilities or recycling treatment because we also don't want to develop any projects because that puts us in conflict with our standard and our program. But usually we collaborate with other project partners who develop and operate these.
Okay, thank you. And then there's a question from, and this is a tough name, Sufaphone Sudachan. And he or she asks whether you mentioned other Asian countries where you or PCX is also involved, and whether you see similar challenges and difficulties, and also what do you think is the best forward for EPR in ASEAN countries, according to your opinion?
Yeah, that's a very tough question. I can share the work that we've been doing a lot of work also in Indonesia. We just recently became part of their national partnership. Sorry, I can't remember always. National Plastic Action Partnership. And we've been talking with some of the government or policymakers in Indonesia because we have very similar situations. And we've been doing a lot of events with ASEAN for regional collaboration because I think that the ASEAN countries, I think we all have the same geopolitical landscape. We encounter the same problems, all right, except maybe for the more developed ASEAN members like Singapore or Malaysia. But it is a common problem that we have. And I think the way forward is really to keep on sharing like what we know. And it has to be a conversation among all types of stakeholders, not just government, not just PROs, but also like everyone, because I think everyone has a place or a role to play. And like we were proposing also in the Global Plastic Treaty for the Philippine delegation that we should actually encourage what you call regional blocks that, like, let's say ASEAN can help each other achieve their um, national targets by placing a structure here, funding a structure there, where whoever has the space or the budget or the capacity to have infrastructure, and then the other members of the region can also fund or invest in that or have other contributions to that, so it becomes more of a regional collaboration. So I think that's also one opportunity that we can look at as ASEAN.
Thank you very much. We have another question from Pauline, and we are a little bit over the time, but I think there is time. So please, Pauline, go ahead. Please unmute yourself.
Sorry. Athelie, is there any EPR fees being mandated by the government for the 4 packaging type?
Yeah. Well, there's no EPR fee similar to the eco-modulated fees. What the current fee system here is, there are membership fees and registration fees for PROs and also to register your EPR program. Then whatever the cost of diversion, recovery, whatever the cost of reducing your footprint is, then those are the fees involved. But like per plastic type, there are no regulated fees yet. I'm not sure also if that's being considered in the near term. Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. With that, I would say we thank Athelie very, very much for sharing her profound knowledge. This was very impressive. Thank you, and thanks for all the questions. As already mentioned, we do have our last session on, it will be December 11th. And in this session, we will introduce EXPRA and CITEO, 2 organizations in which PROs can network worldwide. And we also present a digital open source registration system that can be adapted and further developed free of charge. In other words, we introduce tools and organizations that can make the work of a PRO easier. So we hope to see you again. And say bye for now, and thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.